Electrocast.
Why wait to see if you'll get something you like this Valentine's Day when you can go to BlueNile.com and find something you'll love? Whether you're looking to treat yourself to a little winter sparkle or show a galentine how much you appreciate them, Blue Nile offers a wide selection of high-quality designs, expert guidance, and free 30-day returns for the ultimate peace of mind. You can even design your own jewelry. Right now, save up to 50% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
On this episode of Missing the Point, we'll discuss the Bruins through the first 2 games of the first round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs, how far the Bruins' end-of-season momentum can carry them, and if the Bees can trust Tuukka Rask to finally win them a playoff series. This is Missing the Point, episode 60. But it's all relative.
Welcome into Missing the Point. My name's Joe Malkin. I'm joined tonight by Mike Marcangelo, Bob Kelly, and of course, our executive producer, Craig D'Alessandro. And we are here to talk to you guys tonight about a little Bruins hockey. The team in Boston that is doing, could we say second best right now? Or would they be third behind the Revolution? But nonetheless, the Bruins are in the playoffs, and they're taking on the Washington Capitals. And the series, after 2 games, is tied at 1-1. And this was definitely an episode we wanted to get out almost beforehand, but now we get some games to react to here. And guys, it's been 2 interesting games, to say the least. Game 2 was won on a Brad Marchand overtime goal, 39 seconds into the overtime period. And I think we need to start with the big elephant in the room, because this series very well could be 2-0 in favor of the Bruins. Of course, Washington's a little bit bigger. They're a little bit stronger, but the Bruins are probably more skilled. But the elephant in the room, Mike, is the goalie.
We're starting here.
Rask. We're going to start here. And there's a reason why I want to start here. I want to work from worst to best, kind of. But with Tuukka Rask, you have Jeremy Swayman, the rookie out of the University of Maine, on the bench, who has played phenomenal during the regular season. We all know that Tuukka becomes Tuukka in the playoffs. And would you say at this point he is already playoff Tuukka?
Do you want to start with me? Because I don't know how long I'm going to go, or should we go?
No. I want to start with you because I want you to go, because I feel like we're going to not only get some good points here, but we're going to have a lot of good talking points out of this.
All right, Craig, I'm glad that you hit record. This is Tuukka playoff Tuukka, whatever the hell you want to call it. Yes, we are now 2 games in, right? We see a situation where he's not losing you a game. Sure, get it. He's not the reason you lose, but you want to know what else he isn't? He's not the reason you win. He's not single-handedly winning you a game. I get it. Deflections, not completely his fault. But is it too much to ask for him just to make one outrageous stop and save the game there? Because in reality, right now, 2 games in, Tuukka Rask has stopped 65 of 71 shots for a .915 save percentage. Craig Anderson, a guy who has not started, who played us 4 years ago with Ottawa, 40 years old, a journeyman, not a great goalie, has a .929 save percentage. Who gets paid more? Tuukka. So I fundamentally believe that the Boston Bruins live and die by how Tuukka performs. The problem is, I don't think Tuukka believes that either. I think he buys in. I think as long as he just goes out there and he doesn't make a catastrophic mistake, that it's fine, that he won't have any of the limelight. But we need him to do something extraordinary, right? We need him to stand on his head. And so far he hasn't. So yeah, this is Tuukka. I mean, good for him. He hasn't gone home to play golf yet. I commend him on that. But could you just save us a game, please?
I want to poke one hole into what you said there about the difference between him and Craig Anderson. They've both made 65 saves. The difference is that Tuukka's faced 71 shots and Craig Anderson has faced 70.
Yeah, I'm aware. I didn't use it because it didn't fit what I was saying.
I know that's why I'm using it against you. And I'm going to argue a point that I don't think you even start Jeremy Swayman in game 3, and I think you stick with Tuukka.
Yeah, of course you stick with Tuukka. Of course, you give him the chance to go out and earn the money that you've been paying him. Maybe this is the year that he decides, maybe game 3 is the game that he decides, you know what? I'm sick and tired of having this label of we wish he was more like Thomas.
Yeah, but is he going to – but he's not going to do that, Mike.
He's never going to be that guy. Yeah. That's the thing is like we know we've seen Tuukka since before Thomas was even in town. It's the same Tuukka. We know who Tuukka is. It doesn't surprise me anymore. Yes, I still am like, God damn it, Tuukka. But it still doesn't surprise me that he makes these amazing saves. Those deflections and whenever there's traffic in net is his kryptonite, man. And there's something about it where if he can't get that puck right off the stick, more often than not, that puck's going in. And it is frustrating at times. But at the same time, it's like, okay, so I know we pay him to be that top-level goalie, which is why I think after this year we don't see him in Boston anymore. I think Swayman does come in and take this job moving forward. But for the time being, what frustrates me is the Bruins don't play the type of hockey that they know Tuukka is going to succeed in sometimes. And that's getting rid of those pucks in front of the net, not letting those defensive breakouts, because that's when Tuukka gives up those easy goals. Like, Tuukka's always going to be there to make those crazy go across the crease saves with the stick and make these crazy glove saves. But it's those deflections and easy goals that he lets in. And it's just frustrating to me that time and time again, this defense lets it happen.
That's part of the criticism of Tuukka Rask is that he's too much of a butterfly style goaltender, which has been a problem because most goalies are butterfly style goalies now. And one criticism I was reading about today of Tuukka is that his back is still not 100%. So he's having a tough time getting to the ice. So you have a butterfly goaltender that can't get into the butterfly position.
There it is. Okay, but again, I really like a back is a weird injury. Anyone who's had back problems, like, you know it, right? I get it. But here we are, another postseason where we're talking about another injury for Tuukka. I mean, last year, again, he left. He had his reasons. I get it. It looks bad. I will always hold it against him for what he did when he returned to Boston as opposed to leaving for Boston. But we've seen other playoff fronts when he has cramps, right? Can't make a start. So it's always something. That was the one that killed me, man. It's always something with him. Like, to your point, Bobby, yeah. If the defenders let someone behind them, we all know as fans that instantly it's a goal, right? Just you can count on that just as much as you can count on the fact that, oh, it's playoff time. Something will be bothering Tuukka, and it will be something that they can use in their narrative, because I'm not the only one that has one at the end of the postseason that says, well, his back wasn't 100%. Well, what is it then? Stop paying him $8 million a year. Like, stop, please.
Well, so we have to agree that he's a world-class goaltender. Because he doesn't show up in the playoffs doesn't mean he's not a world-class goaltender. And we're going back and forth on this because, Mike, where you started this segment with how much he's turning into Tuukka, and then you said, well, we got to give him a shot to earn that money. Well, now it's back to, but what reason has he given the city of Boston and the front office to keep putting him out there? The fact that he's a world-class goaltender really is the simple answer, right? But then the next thing I would say is all these people that are calling for Swayman, that want Swayman in goal for game 3. Well, okay, Swayman's been great. He's been phenomenal. And there's a reason why Jeremy Swayman became the backup goaltender for the Boston Bruins in the playoffs. And it's because of Tuukka Rask's injuries and Yaroslav Halak's bout with COVID. And that's when Dan Vladar and Jeremy Swayman took over. And you're looking at a rookie. When you have this type of situation in sports, I always equated back to the movie For Love of the Game, when Billy Chappell's throwing a perfect game in the 9th inning with 2 outs, and the New York Yankees send up the rookie. Well, why do you send up the rookie? Because he's got nothing to lose. He's not thinking about anything. All he's thinking about is going up there and putting the ball in play. And it's the same thing with Jeremy Swayman. That's for the regular season. When you put him between the pipes in the postseason, how do we know what he's going to give you is better than Tuukka Rask?
Yeah, Bobby, I don't want to speak for you, but I don't think either of us are calling for Swayman to start, right? I think
I'm not saying you guys. This is an attack on the Bruins.
Collectively on this show, I think what I'm really just begging for, what appears to be, what it feels like is the 10th season in a row, is for Tuukka to show some balls, right, in the playoffs. And the reason why I get baited into this, and I said before on this very show that I don't care if the Bruins win every single regular season game. I still think Tuukka is going to do what he usually does in the playoffs.
Yep.
But after Swayman started and Tuukka came back, he was pretty much lights out. It felt like he took to that, right? He was like, well, this is my job. So a little of that onus was finally being put on him. But now, again, don't get it twisted. It's not his fault that they lost either of these two games. But he's also not the reason that you won them.
So to go on Swayman too is, Joe, I completely agree that, like, listen, Swayman's stats in the regular season were absolutely lights out. This dude had a 1.5 goals allowed against. Save percentage was .945, and he was 7-3. Like, absolute lights out. I'm pretty sure he had 2 shutouts this season. So absolutely lights out as a rookie goaltender. But you never know how a rookie is going to react to the NHL playoffs. It's the same thing in every single sport. The playoffs are a different speed. I do think, if to elaborate on what you just said, Mike, I do think if we ended up losing that game last night, which thank God we didn't, I do think we see Swayman in Game 3, not even because of the Tuukka performance, more because of the energy that I think it would have brought the team. To have the rookie goaltender in there, I think it would have changed everything about how they were playing. But winning that game, definitely gave Tuukka another night. There's no way we see Swayman in Game 3. No chance.
Like, statistically, I think what I'm saying to you, the arguments that I'm making are like the gut, right? They're the eyes of the gut. They're just what you've seen. Statistically, he gives you the best chance to win a game.
Sure.
Bar none. And you don't want to run the risk of ruining a rookie too early on by putting him out there and having him go, let's say 0-2 or 0-3 in this series, right? Because that, if that lingers, then you're really screwed. You don't have a plan for Tuukka. I just think my biggest criticism as now, right now, I think it holds true, is he makes really bad, like really hard saves look easy. He does. Give him the credit. He does that. But he also makes really easy saves look hard and lets easy goals in. 5-hole is, it's open season for him.
Upper net stick side gets him every single time. He cannot get that stick up there to save his life. He can't do it anymore.
And again, I'm not a professional athlete, right? We all know that. So before we start coming at me for that, just I'm aware. However, if you know that you have one thing that is your kryptonite over the span of, this has been since the 2010 playoffs against Philly, right? The same things have been happening. Like, fix it. Just fix it. Do something to improve your chances of that not happening again. And from where I sit, he's just content being a guy who's on a team that wins as opposed to being the reason for that team winning.
And we've seen that with a lot of keepers in the past, right? Like, there's a lot of goaltenders, Patrick Waugh, Henrik Lundqvist, Jonathan Quick even.
He was an animal.
Yeah, well, no, and that's why I'm bringing those names up, because, those are really all one of them, Jonathan Quick, will likely be a Hall of Fame goaltender, but the other two guys are without a doubt Hall of Famers. And Tuukka probably is as well. Looking at his numbers right now, the guy in the regular season is .306, 163, and 66. And really, his first full season wasn't until the 2013-14 season, but he was a member of the Bruins starting in 2007, which is amazing. I can't believe that it went that far back. And the year that they won the Stanley Cup, he went 11-14-2 in the regular season, so he was even under 500 behind Tim Thomas.
Do you remember what happened the year before, Joe?
Yeah, he was a starter for the year before.
We were up 3-0 against the Flyers, and then we lost that series 4-3 after being up in Game 7, 3-0.
That's
3-0, yeah.
This is what he does. This is what he does. Just again, you're probably right. He'll probably be a Hall of Famer. I get it. He's one of those statistical Hall of Famers, right? That Bobby hates, that I sometimes argue for. What I will say, he would be one. He'd be iffy for me only because it's not like. So his stats are really good, and he was on a contending team. He's not like one of those goalies that posted really great stats but could never get to the Stanley Cup. He's now been there twice.
It should be more with the teams that he's had around him.
He absolutely should at least have. He should have one cup as starting goalie, and there's no doubt about that. I mean, you look back at 2013.
He played pretty well. He played pretty well.
Yeah.
He played great in that series. We should have had one there. He also should have had one against the
Blackhawks.
Blues. He caved.
That was the point where the Blackhawks were on a roll, though. I mean, you couldn't stop that team.
They were a dynasty. Like that was a huge dynasty. But to your point, Bobby, right? Game 7, home ice. I don't care. Yeah. You do superhuman things to stop that puck from going in the net. He couldn't do it.
And the thing is what bothers me with Tuukka is, like, I don't want to turn this into absolute Tuukka hate fest, because listen, this man has done a lot. Like, you guys know me. It's hard to get to a championship. It's hard to win a championship. He's been the starting goalie for a team that's been there twice. Okay.
Yeah.
But it does get to a point where, like, listen, this isn't the Tatum and Brown argument, though. You know what I mean? He's not 23 years old. No. He's not a young dude. Tuukka is who he is at this point. And Mike, I completely agree with you on that point. And I think this is, I know we said this before, but this is the year for Tuukka to prove it. Because not only do we have his replacement in the wings. You know what I mean? If Tuukka leads us to a cup this year, great, extend him, do whatever you got to do. If we don't win it this year, and Tuukka does have a letdown getting there, and that's why we end up getting knocked out because he gave up an easy goal in overtime, whatever the case may be, that's got to be it for him. It has to be. It has to be.
Yeah, and I mean, you're absolutely right. Not only do you have Jeremy Swayman waiting in the wings, you also have a young Dan Vladar. And I'm not saying that Jeremy Swayman or Dan Vladar are Tuukka Rask, but at this point in time, let's bring it back to 2021. The 34-year-old, he turned 34 on March 10th, again, is an elite goaltender. He is now 1-1 in the 2021 NHL playoffs. As Mike mentioned at the top of this segment, he's made 65 saves on 71 shots for a .915 save percentage. And it has been the team around him that have kept the Bruins in these two games. I mean, they've gone to overtime in game 1 and game 2, with Washington winning 3-2 in overtime in game 1. That was a quick one in the overtime period as well. And as we mentioned, the Bruins won last night on a Brad Marchand goal, 4-3. So moving beyond the goaltender, and I guess the final words on that is the same thing that Bobby said. This isn't a Tuukka hate fest. We know that Tuukka's great, but he needs to prove it, because there is a reason why, after Bobby mentioned the 2009-2010 season, there is a reason why they went out and got Tim Thomas and brought him in here to win, because he wasn't ready. And now Tuukka's been in the same position multiple times. And Bobby, you hit the nail on the head. If he can't do it now, it's time to move on. And maybe it's not to Jeremy Swayman, but it's time to move on.
Yeah, I think what's most damning about this, right, or what highlights it the most, however you want to frame it, is you can make the argument that he's the reason why in the last couple of years that you've been the President's Trophy winner.
Absolutely.
Right? He elevates you to such an extent in the regular season that it makes you, it lets you know that he can do it. He has it in him, but he just, for whatever reason, in the playoffs, he just can't. So now's the time to change it. And, you know, it might sound like I hate him. I think if there was ever a year, this is the year that he changes it. Because as you both have mentioned, there is a replacement there. Like there has been never before, right? So there's a young replacement there who costs a little bit less. They can, you know, the front office can invest elsewhere on the team and start him. And again, now's the time to prove it.
And we've seen the Bruins right now are in the mindset of turning this over to a new young group of promising rookies, young guys. We saw it with Zdeno. He's out. They turned this entire defense over. We saw it with Krug. Like, the Bruins aren't going to be the team that's going to throw a contract extension at Rask just because he's Tuukka Rask and because he's been here forever. Listen, they don't care. They will bring that rookie goalie in. So just to keep reiterating it, this is it for Tuukka. If he doesn't do it now, he's not going to do it.
And what's great is that they do have that, Bobby. They've turned over the defense. They made a trade and basically gave up a bag of pucks to Buffalo to get Taylor Hall, which has been a great signing. But I can tell you why he's not on the positive side of the performances for me as we move on here. But Yeah, no, I mean, and we are going to move on to that because the core that is still around, it's interesting to look to look at this roster. I feel like Jake DeBrusk has been around for a decade, and he's only 24.
Right.
And he's still young. Yeah.
But, looking around this roster, 2 games into the 2021 NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, Bruins and Capitals, of course, they've now met 3 times in a row. They met last Tuesday or Wednesday, and the Bruins fell to them in the season finale. Of course, they were resting everyone and then lost the first game of the series. But now they've tied it back up. We expect Tuukka Rask to start the game on May 19th. And looking at this roster, Mike, who have been your top performers for the Bruins so far in this first series?
I think, so you have to say Jake DeBrusk, right? I think just from the mere fact that, he's 2 goals, 2 points, he's a positive plus minus. I think having Taylor Hall on your team, just him being there, he's a positive. And I understand there are some things that he could do a little bit better, but he gives you a little bit of an offensive threat that you have not had in so long. And he's not afraid to get dirty. I mean, he tied the game with just over, I think 2 minutes and 49 seconds left in regulation because he was in the right spot and he did the right things. I also think, this is going to sound weird, Marchand, right? What he did last night. Now, if you in real time, when you look at him punching the guy in the nuts, as man, this is just stupid. It's so stupid. You can't do that. You can't.
And Mike, you're talking about the guy that was licking people's faces 2 years ago.
Yeah, but you're thinking, okay, here's that guy again. Here's that guy that you barely.
We love that guy though.
Kinda, but last night it felt like he did what he did to get his team back involved because he 100%. Knew that Tuukka was under siege, that the Capitals for the second game in a row came out firing, and the Bruins were kind of flat, which is odd. It was tied 2-2 at the end of the first. It's hard to say, after the fact that they were flat, but they were. So he did the things that he needed to do in order to instigate and to get his people fired up, and that won't show up on a stat line. But I think for that reason that he's in the positives.
That game literally had the ability, the game to be a 15 goal thriller, and I think that's where you're absolutely right, Mike. In Marchand being on close to the top of the list, of course, DeBrusk, Nick Ritchie has had a great series so far. Grzelcyk and Pasternak. If you look at the whole roster, even though it's 1-1, there's only 2 offensive players on the Bruins right now that don't have a point, either a goal or an assist, and that's Sean Corelli and Chris Wagner. And Chris Wagner is only playing 9.5 minutes a game, and Sean Corelli is only playing 11 minutes a game in the first 2 games of the series. Which, of course, I look at the other side of the ice, and 43-year-old Zdeno Chara still playing 16 minutes a night in the playoffs, which we'll get to. But for me, I agree with you, Marchand. I mean, I think in a situation like that, Mike, where you need to, it's like a manager getting himself thrown out of a playoff game in baseball. Yep. Right. It's like, I mean, I can't even pick out an NFL or an NBA equivalent, but that's basically what it is. It's getting your team fired up around you to take the focus off of someone else. And if we're taking off the focus off of Tuukka, I'm okay with that. And I think you two are as well. But it's Marchand, and Mike, you had written down Bergeron as well. I mean, I just think because he has the C on his chest, you have to put him in that conversation. He's scored a goal. He's playing 20 minutes a night, 19 minutes and 59 seconds to be on average. He's playing the third most minutes, fourth most minutes for the Bruins. And that's what it means to be a Bruins captain. And he's putting the team on his back, and while at the same time allowing his teammates, the Marchands, the DeBrusk, to make their impact where needed.
Even Taylor Hall in the press conference after the game specifically praised Marchand and his leadership. He was saying, listen, Marchand hasn't been showing up much on the stat sheet. When you're watching, he may not be doing everything that you think he should be doing in that moment, but specifically said it's not all about goal scoring or scoring points. When he goes into a forecheck 1-on-2, comes out with the puck, or if the D-man has him and he spins off quickly and settles the play down, those are huge plays, Hall said. There's no stat for that, really. But we see that on the bench, and we're able to galvanize and come together. So literally just Brad Marchand being Brad Marchand, stats and playmaker and electricness aside, just him being that dirt dog, getting down and dirty, doing that extra, making that extra pass, doing the extra play, brings this team together and brings them to a new level. And you saw, when Marchand scored that goal, there's not a better person on the team to score that game-winning goal.
Oh, yeah.
This team was so fired up that it was Marchand that got that snipe.
Yeah.
You saw the Taylor Hall quote where he's like, nah, it wasn't that big a deal. I've been lifting, and Marchand doesn't weigh that much. Like, it was just so perfect the way that it all went down. And to see him jumping into Hall's arms like that, it's just the chemistry on the bench of this team is something that we haven't seen in a while. It's almost reminiscent of that 2011 year because we brought in those reinforcements that we haven't been able to bring in years past. And these guys aren't just good, they're sick. They're playing on a different level, like all three of them. So it's awesome. I agree. It's Marchand.
What we saw last night, in game 2 was that is a well-timed Marchand, right?
Mm-hmm.
It isn't biting somebody, kissing somebody, none of that. He knew that what was happening to him, he took liberties were being taken with him. So he sticks somebody in the nuts. They both got a penalty for that, right? It also showed his teammates that, yeah, we're getting our asses kicked right now, but guess what? We're just going to get back up. And if we have to do that ugly thing to level the playing field, we're going to do it. And I think it was poetic that, like, as you said, he's the guy that scored the goal because you could feel a shift after that, right? It wasn't a pretty game by any stretch. I actually believe that the Capitals beat the living hell out of us. The hits were close, but they really weren't if you watched. They were absolutely killing us. And Brad just knew what to do. So I think you need people on your team like that to know when to kind of push the boundary or to toe that line, but not cross it so far that you can't come back, right? Because I think even like that Vancouver series, I know we keep going back, there were points in time in Brad Marchand's history with the Bruins where you could, like, as a fan, you say, well, yeah, he was wrong. If he wasn't on our team, I would hate him. Last night, what he did, you want that guy on your team at all times.
Yep.
He took the temperature of the room, and he knew exactly what he needed to do, and he did it.
What's interesting is you mentioned the penalty. So he got penalized, and him and John Carlson of the Washington Capitals lead the series with 4 penalty minutes each. And you mentioned the physicality of this Washington Capitals team, and where you have those leaders, you have the Bergeron, who is kind of the lead by example, and you have the Marchand, who's the lead by doing something outside the box to get his team back into the game. You got to look on that other side and really give them credit, give Washington credit for the team that they've put together, because they're kind of an old-timey hockey team where they're physical, they're big, they hit you hard, and that's got to be something that's going through Bruce Cassidy's mind when he's talking to his team pre- and post-game is, get through this 7-game series. This is going to be the toughest team you're going to play in terms of physicality in this entire playoffs. Maybe the best team until you get to Tampa, because this is a very good team and they have a great leader in Alex Ovechkin. But by the way, they have your former captain for the past 15 years. And they also have, one of the better USA hockey players of this generation, and that's TJ Oshie.
Yep.
So they have a very good team on the other side of the ice. But when you put these two teams back to back and you really put them on the same playing field or ice, if you will, I think the Bruins have the upper hand. And someone else I want to throw into the mix of this conversation is Charlie McAvoy, who I give Don Sweeney a lot of credit right now in this series, just through 2 games. And I know it's early, and sometimes on Missing the Point, we have a habit of being a little too early to the game, Bobby, the Red Sox preseason show. But when you look at what Charlie McAvoy has done in this series, he has an assist in 2 games, but he also has the highest plus minus among any player on the ice. Any player on the ice. Nobody, he's at +3. And there's a reason for that. He's become a very good defenseman. And it's almost like not having Chara on the other side of the ice from him has been a good thing for Charlie McAvoy. He has played very well on the defensive end, and he has bailed out the offense and Tuukka on many occasions already in the series.
We were on them last year, and we've been talking about Chara leaving for a couple of years, right? Maybe they held on a little bit too long. I think they did the right thing because they let McAvoy develop to be the defenseman that he needed to be. So now in a playoff game or in a playoff series, you can be down. It can be 1-1, but you have a plus minus at 3. He's always on the ice for the good stuff, and not a lot of bad stuff happens when he's out there. That's all you can ask for. Oh, and by the way, he's a pretty skilled puck handler. and he's fast. So I think, I think we owe a lot to the mentor that Big Z was to McAvoy, because I don't think he's a player that he is now if it had not been for Zdeno Chara.
No, and he's playing 25 and a half minutes a game.
And you think about it, how many defenders do you see? So that Hall game-tying goal, you know who was also right there poking at that puck? McAvoy. He was right there ready to poke that thing.
Can we talk about that goal for a second? Because was there any doubt in anybody else's mind that should have been called back because of the amount of bodies in the crease? Or are we just forgetting about that? And
you don't blow the whistle, it's not getting called back.
Sure, right. They didn't blow the whistle. They didn't go and review it. They called it a goal on the ice, and that was that.
What leads me to believe that's a real goal and that they shouldn't have been called back is you saw early in that game that they blew the whistle really early. There was a puck where Tuukka did not have control. He did not cover it. Everyone could see it, and they still blew it dead. So it tells me that they were inclined to blow it dead earlier, and someone got in their ear and said, just kind of, it's playoffs, kind of let them play.
I would say that that's fair, and that's how that turned out. And Taylor Hall did a great job to put that puck in the net. And talk about that trade. But Bobby, go ahead.
No, that's so I'm going to go right off of what you just said, because that was one of my other guys, is Taylor Hall. Just having him here is such a big difference on this team, man. I put it in Discord chat a few times. The difference that he's had on David Krejci, the difference that he's had on Craig Smith, just the chances these guys are getting, the amount of offense that we're generating is unbelievable. I want to go back and just shout out Mr. Cassidy Mr. Sweeney for making that trade, because that has to be one of the best deadlines we've had since 2011. Since we brought in Horton, Kelly, and to a lesser extent, Thomas Cabriolet to this team, it's been the same type of production that this team has with these three guys. It's been Hall, Smith, Riley, Lazar, and we got all these guys for a bucket of balls. And it just is such a good trade, and turned this team into what we see right now, into a team that, listen, they got outplayed these past two nights.
Oh, for
absolutely
sure.
Outplayed.
Yep.
Like 100%. And the fact that we're going back to Boston 1-1 just shows the mindset that this team has right now. Like, we could have won both those games easily, and we got our asses kicked in both of them. So it's just a different mindset this team has. And, I to go back to Tuukka, I hope that Tuukka doesn't end up being the one to kill it, because I really like the feng shui.
He won't be.
I love everything about this team, the lineup, the way they've been flowing for the past few months. Like, even in games that they're down, I don't know if you guys remember this regular season game against Buffalo, but we were down, I think it was 5-1 going into the third period. And they came all the way back. Yep. They ended up losing 6-4, but it was just unbelievable, the fight that this team has. So I love the swagger this team has, and I think Taylor Hall is a big reason.
Yeah, there's no shame in losing, but there's a lot of shame in not showing up. Tuukka.
So what's interesting about Taylor Hall is he's been in the NHL since 2010, was drafted by Edmonton. We all remember it because everybody was talking about the Bruins trying to get this Taylor Hall kid out of Calgary, Alberta. And it's just interesting that they've had to wait 10 years, 11 years to finally get him on this team. And he's such an interesting personality, because if you're listening to this podcast, you don't know the Bruins, you don't know Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall has he's kind of underperformed his entire career, except for the MVP season when he won the Hart Trophy in 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
So I think one of the big things with this kid is that everybody thought he was going to be the guy when he came into Edmonton, and Edmonton wasn't good enough at the time. And obviously they had the first pick in the draft, and he just never became the guy. And he just kind of puttered out in Edmonton, goes to New Jersey, plays 4 seasons, ends up in Arizona, then Buffalo. And now he finds his way east to Boston. So he's kind of just been making his way south and then east again. So with the way they acquired him and the team that they already had here, there's no reason for Taylor Hall to be the guy. And one thing that I was reading from one of our friends that we like to talk about from time to time on the show is Tony Maserati on 98.5 The Sports Hub, was that he brought up that press conference, Bobby, that you brought up earlier when they asked him about Marchand's goal. And, Taylor says, I had a skate issue at the beginning of overtime and I couldn't be out there. And I was just really happy to see Brad score that goal early, get us out of it. And then, he comes over and jumps on me. And then he had that quote where he said, I've been lifted and he doesn't weigh much. And it was just kind of a fun quote. But Tony Maserati brought up a good point because he also mentioned in that snippet, it felt like I had scored the goal. He was on the bench and the team scores to win a playoff game in overtime. And they come over to the bench to celebrate as a team. And Marchand just finds the first guy and it's Taylor Hall.
Yep.
And he dives on him on the bench. And now to me, and based on everything I've read, seen, watched, heard, that is Taylor Hall understanding that he does not need to be the guy.
Yeah.
That is him understanding that he is just part of this team. So Bobby, you said it perfectly. That trade deadline, they went out and got guys they knew that they could get for nearly nothing and pulled it off. And every single one of them has been playing well here down the stretch. And it's worked out. I think with a shorter season and the teams that they've been playing, I think that's helped as well. But one guy you mentioned was Curtis Lazar, who in 2 games has an assist, 1 point, obviously. But on the season, he played in 17 games, had 2 goals, 2 assists. He was playing 12 minutes a night. And those are pretty good production numbers for a guy that's playing 12 minutes a night, 13 minutes a night. So, Bobby, I'm with you. I like this lineup from top to bottom, offensively and defensively. And prior to this season, when everybody was up in arms that Zdeno Chara left, I think this is where I make an attack on the city of Boston and its fans. I think that this city holds on to guys too long, even if it's for the right reasons. And it's interesting because we didn't see that when the Angels let go of Pujols the other day, and he had been there for 10 years. Different situation, much different situation. He didn't win him a cup. I understand that. But I think, Mike, you said it earlier in the show, I think Zdeno Chara leaving was one of the best things for McAvoy because it was time for that to happen. And who knows? I mean, Chara's doing great with Washington, but he may have held the Bruins back. I'll say it. Let's just throw it out there.
I mean, I won't go that far. I will say that based on what he signed for in Washington, that's why it surprised me that he wasn't here. Right.
Sure.
But
$795,000.
However, it wasn't that he was asking for the world. I think that was the shock. But yeah, listen, he's not young, man, and like his best days are far behind him. We get it, but it's good to have someone like that on your team that's been there, that's been in the trenches in a deep playoff run. We still have Bergeron, Marchand, and to some extent Tuukka, right? He's been on the team, so like he can, they can tap into it. He can just tap out. But Bobby, you were going to say something about Zdeno?
Yeah, so the thing with Zdeno is I think the biggest problem is, yes, for the production, we could have had him. I mean, for the money he got paid, like, I guess I'm surprised we didn't at least offer that.
Yeah.
But the style of play doesn't fit the way Zdeno plays the game anymore. The way the Bruins are trying to play is get up and go. You know what I mean? Like, we're beating teams to the puck. We're not this dump and chase, let's beat the crap out of you, go get the puck and force the puck at the net anymore. You know who's like that? The Capitals. So that's why I think that you see Z playing like he is, because that style of play that they play, it reminds me of those old school Claude dump and chase teams. You know what I mean? Like, they just dump the puck in, they beat the crap out of you, they take it from you, and they score. If that's not going to work, then they're going to forecheck the crap out of you, try and beat the shit out of you, take it from you, score again. So it's just that same type of mindset that the Capitals have is why I think you see Z succeeding. I really do think, Joe, to go back to your point, that if Z is on this team, we don't have that same giddy up because we'd still be trying to make Zdeno be Zdeno. You know what I mean? Like you saw in years past, he slowed this team down time and time again. That's why I do think it was time.
Well, let's approach it a different way, Bobby, because I'm going to agree with you here, but I'm going to kind of appease Mike's take on it too, where he fits the Capitals gameplay better than he fits the Bruins gameplay. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
the Capitals, again, big, strong, physical. They don't need to be fast. They're not going to kill you with speed. But you know who's fast? Boston Bruins
So
are
fast.
fast.
Yeah.
And they can move the puck well. And the Capitals just stand in the way. And that's where he fits in. So it has clearly been a great fit in Washington for Zdeno. And it's been a great move for the Bruins because they've moved on to what they need to move on to for the future. Now, speaking of moving on to what they want to move on to for the future, in the offseason, the Boston Bruins brought in a guy by the name of Craig Smith, who I think we all thought was going to be better than he's been. But as you all may have heard Mike moan and groan there. Mike, what is your problem with Mr. Smith?
If I have to watch 60 more game minutes of Craig Smith absolutely fumbling the puck in the neutral zone and causing turnovers that do not need to happen and having some of, and again, not a professional hockey player or athlete or anything, some of the worst stick handling that I've seen in the last couple of years, I'm going to lose it. Because not only he doesn't have enough offensive upside so far as a Bruin to warrant the amount of mistakes that he makes in the neutral zone for me. Right. I just think if I have to watch that anymore, and that just goes to the greater point, he's not the only person. Neutral zone turnovers are a big problem for the Bruins, and it almost killed them last night. You saw in the second period, they just constantly could not get into the offensive zone. Why? Because it was errant passes. They weren't hustling. But the leader, the flag bearer of that movement that was happening last night, in my opinion, was Craig Smith. So I'm out on him. Out.
You're completely out on the third line center?
Out on him.
Yeah, no. So, well, he's technically the second line center now, isn't he? Or
Great.
second line wing, right? But it doesn't matter. So the thing with Craig Smith, before we're out on him, is he did have a really good regular season. And I don't know what happened to him, because you're right, last night was the most frustrating hockey I've seen from him since he became a Bruin. I don't know what the hell happened.
So bad.
Because you're right, he could not carry the puck through the neutral zone. And it's like all season long, he was one of our best puck handlers. And it's like Tuukka came over to him and was like, bro, we're going to play together tonight. Let's take this game over together. But no, the other guy who's been driving me nuts, and he was until last night, honestly, was Charlie Coyle. Before that one play he made last night where that wraparound was textbook. That was amazing. That was one of the best wraparounds I've seen since I played like NHL hockey in 1994, like the video game for Super Nintendo. Like that shit was perfect. But before that, man, he's been struggling. He was my guy that I was thinking about bringing up the entire time. So far in the playoffs, I think he's minus. I think he's like a -2 so far in the playoffs. He was driving me nuts until that goal last night. Hopefully, he redeemed himself. They actually ended up demoting him, I'm pretty sure, down to the third line before last night. They put DeBrusk up on the 2. But I hope he steps it up going forward. He was my biggest disappointment going into last night, without a doubt. That and the fourth line.
If you are in what was it? It was 13 games 54 games for the Bruins. 19 goals, 32 assists. 13 goals, 19 assists, 32 points. It's pretty good offensive production, right? You cannot forget the fundamentals of the game that you play and are paid very well to play in game 2 of a series where you're being outplayed. You can't do it. And again, go back. It's now Wednesday. Go back and watch Monday's game, and you will be as equally as frustrated as I was in real time, just watching him in the neutral zone, just lollygagging, handing off pucks. It was offensive. It was offensive for someone who's never skated in a professional manner or in an amateur manner. Can't do it. But if I could, I wouldn't do that.
When you look at a guy like Charlie Coyle, who's -1, and has been demoted, Bobby, he's probably my guy too that's been the most disappointing, because he hasn't completely lived up to the hype when he came into this Bruins team. But I still, I know we've kind of been negative Nancy's on a few guys here tonight. Regardless, I think this team can take this series. It's going to go 6 or 7. They're coming back to Boston for 2. What I really want to see, and this will be the first and only mention of the state of the world, what I really want to see is them take this series and come back for game 1 of the second series with a full garden. May 29th is when it opens back up. And I'm not sure when the second series starts, but I know that game 7 of this series against the Capitals is on May 27th. So regardless of when that series starts, if the Bruins are there, they're gonna play in front of a full garden.
No crowd like a full TD Garden crowd, man. There is no crowd like a full TD Garden crowd.
No, there isn't, especially for a Bruins game. A Celtics crowd is pretty good, but I would say that the Bruins crowd is probably currently the best in Boston.
Yeah, we're hockey town.
We are a hockey town. That's what happens when you're this far north. So, guys, we're 2 games in. It's 1-1. They're coming back to Boston for games 3 and 4. They'll head back to Washington for game 5. And if necessary, Boston for game 6 and Washington for game 7. With the way these 2 games have gone, I know there's a couple of variables, especially with the goaltender. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would just argue that Tuukka's not a variable. He's a consistent. He's a constant. You know what he's going to do. What I will say, which is interesting, right? Like I didn't know this until I started doing a little research for the show, is that we've now seen 11 consecutive Bruins Capitals playoff games decided by a single goal. 6 of those have gone into overtime. So there's not going to be a 5-0, 3-0. This is all going to go, 5-4, whatever it might be. And I think if we can sneak out, if we can go back to Washington up 3-1, that's amazing. But I do see this. I see this series ending in 7, and I think that the Bruins match up very well against the Capitals. Conversely, I think that the Capitals are probably the hardest opponent aside from the defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning for the Bruins. But if we can have a moment be amplified like it was last night where Marchand takes the game in his own hands. If the players, if Bergeron, if Taylor Hall, if God forbid Tuukka Rask can read the moment and say, you know what, it's not happening right now. I'm gonna make it happen. Then it could be over in 6. I think we're gonna be talking about this series until May 27th. But I do think that the Bruins win this in 7.
So, Bobby, what do you think of this series?
Yeah, I do think it's going 7. The most promising thing to me with this series so far is the fact that we have been outplayed both games. And it's 1-1. We're going back to Boston tied up with the chance to really take control of this series. And if there's one thing about the Bruins in the playoffs that we've seen is they play their best hockey at home. And when they do play their best hockey in the playoffs, they don't just beat teams by 1 goal. They win 4-1. They win 5-1. When this team is firing, they absolutely dominate teams. Going back to Mike's point, I don't think that's what's going to happen in this series. I do think it's going to continue to stay close, but I think the Bruins end up taking this strictly because of the fact that, listen, we have been outplayed. We haven't played our best hockey yet. Absolutely not. Like, not even close to the best hockey that the Bruins are capable of. And we're tied 1-1 going back to Boston. So, you know what I mean? We're going the right direction. I think this is over in 6. I don't think it gets to 7. I think it's 6.
Just to ask a question, though, Bobby, not to steal your job, Joe, but can the argument be made that Washington has also not played their best hockey yet either?
But they've played their game. That's the thing is, like, we've been playing the Capitals game and trying to keep up with the Capitals game of hockey. We haven't played our brand of hockey yet in this series. And the only time we've seen them play it was in the overtime last night where we ended it in 39 seconds. So I agree that the Capitals haven't played their best hockey, but they've been playing their hockey. And guess what? It's 1-1.
Mike, I would say that the Capitals are playing their best hockey because they won the Eastern Division.
Currently, though.
Sure. Currently, right now, I think the Bruins are being pretty consistent to how they were in the regular season to this point, which is why I think there's still buildup. Where I think the Capitals they might be on the downswing. I mean, is that Capitals team, the way they're built, this is kind of a rhetorical question, are they built to win a Stanley Cup this year? I don't think so. I don't think they're built for stamina. I think they're built for just brute force.
Hockey's weird though, Joe. You know it, right? You and I have actually had a conversation, like it just takes one thing to happen. And then like, let's say, what if Tampa gets eliminated? What if the road opens up? I could see a situation where like, I don't believe that the Bruins can win a Stanley Cup right now. So I hope that you save that, Craig, for when they do, and you can use that against me. But I mean, if there was ever a season where if a team catches fire, it feels like it's hard to bet against Ovechkin. It just is.
Oh yeah. Oh, without a doubt.
That snapshot yesterday was
that
was wild.
I mean, he's probably still the best player in the NHL, like single best player in the NHL.
He's the best offensive player in the NHL, no doubt.
Oh, sure.
He's the most feared. How about that? Like in a crunch time now, because now he's a champion.
Right. And it took him a long time to get there. And he was always kind of that guy. He always was a pure scorer, as Bobby just alluded to. But one other thing I want to point to is the fact that I know that these teams play each other a lot during the regular season, but the way that the season was formatted this year, they played 8 games against the Capitals in the regular season and were 4-2-2. So they picked up 10 points against this Capitals team that ended up finishing first in the East. So I think it goes 7, Mike. I'm with you, and I think the Bruins take this. And I think we're kind of being homers in that way. But I think after last night, what we saw, I think Bobby is absolutely right. They haven't played their best hockey yet. They're coming home for 2, and there's probably no better team at home in the NHL than Boston. And even with the amount of fans that are going to be there, that place is going to be rocking.
This is the thing, man. Like earlier in the early playoff series, right? Everyone on the Bruins, they tap into that extra gear. They all do more than they actually can, and they play better than they normally are to get them to the Stanley Cup. And then when they need, again, it sounds like I planned this, but then when they need their goaltender to do the same thing, that he can't do it. So I will not be surprised if the Bruins get to the Stanley Cup, if they win every series in 7, and then they get there and they're all gassed because they've done more than anyone thought possible to get there. And now their silly putty goalie just does what he always does. So I don't think we're homers though. I mean, listen, 2 out of the last, what was it? 2 out of the last 7 years, or 2 times in the last decade, the Bruins have been President's Cup winners, President's Trophy winners. They're a really good team. And Cassie's a really good coach, and Rask is a really good regular season goalie. Let's just see what happens. I think in the first 2 series, like you always do, you see that the players in front of Rask do more than they are normally capable of to get them to the next. And when they have to turn back and rely on him, they can't. So that will be their downfall again, is my prediction. I know it's glass half full, but
Mike believes that Tuukka needs to stand on his head. Marchand needs to start stick checking guys in the cup. And the young guys need to keep producing, and Bruce Cassidy needs to keep being the coach that he is. I think we'll get that. And I'm with you, Mike. I don't know if this is necessarily the team to win the Stanley Cup, but they're at least moving in the right direction. And that was very quick because, coming off of last season where things kind of fell off the rails in the playoffs, they were playing very well. And then with the 2 canoes and everything else.
So why did they fall off the rails? Let's not go back into that. But I think, like, if we just, Bobby, I know that you have your last word, and I'll kind of throw this to you. What an interesting transition it has been this season, because for the first 5 games of the season, the Bruins could not score even strength. They could not. They were a terrible 5-on-5 offensive team, and now they're really good. So, like, credit to Cassidy and the entire squad for turning it around, and, for this game even happening, because they played their asses off all season. They played above themselves, and I think they'll do it a couple more times.
I do think that this team does have a chance, and I'm going to go back to what Mike said a little bit earlier, is the Bruins and Capitals have played all 1-goal games. The last 8, you said?
11.
The last 8 times? 11 times?
Yeah.
That goes towards the Bruins' advantage, in my opinion. This team is a team that, when it comes down to it, in those 1-goal games, they pull them out. They find a way. They always get that late goal. They always find a way to push it to overtime. No, regular season overtime is different, but how many times in the regular season did you see this team get that extra point because they scored those 2 goals in the third? Yeah, they ended up losing, but guess what? They got it to overtime. Overtime in the playoffs is a whole different animal. I do see the Bruins making a run here. I really do. I think right now we're at plus 1,100 for the Stanley Cup champions, and we are, and I think that's like 6th or 7th in the league. I think the league is sleeping on the Bruins, and I do think the Bruins really do have a chance to make a run here. Just like we said, because of this, the makeup of this team, it really does remind me a lot of that 2011 team, where it just feels like they're a hockey family. They're a team that They don't have Tim Thomas. I know. I get it.
Just a goaltender. They don't have a goaltender with balls. How about that? Like, never mind Tim Thomas.
Don't know, but we don't know that. That's not true. We don't know that, Mike. We don't know because Swayman could, and we haven't seen that yet.
And what I hope, though, is that the rest of the team just has enough balls to get him through. Because in years past, man, they haven't had a supporting cast like they have right now. You know what I mean? Like, listen, I know Kevin Hayes is awesome, or all these guys that we tried to pick up in the past that were our trade acquisitions. Listen, they're not Taylor Hall,
Jerome McGinley,
Mike Riley. They weren't. Yeah, but Jerome McGinley was on the back nine. So was Rick Nash. Like all these guys that we got that were supposed to be our new second wings, right wing.
Jaromir Jagr.
Even him, he was 50 when we got him. Granted, he's still playing hockey at a high level, but like. It's a different team this year. The makeup is different from top to bottom. So I really do think this team has a run in them. But like Mike keeps saying, it goes as far as Tuukka can take them. And I hope that the rest of the team can overcome that Tuukka factor.
This team might have a run as long as the goaltender doesn't get the runs. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, boy.
Ooh, that was a good one. I like that. That was good.
We're going to end it there. We've talked about the Bruins at length at this point, and you heard it here first. Bobby thinks they're going to win the Stanley Cup. So after we've effectively ripped Tuukka Rask a new one, and hopefully he can stand on his head, we know he'll listen and he'll prove Mike wrong. And if not, what's that?
He's a friend of the show. I'd love to talk to him.
We can say that everybody's a friend of the show. So, well, we hope everybody out there that is listening is doing well. And, again, I guess it's the second time I'll say it because it's an exciting time as the world is beginning to get back to normal, and especially the Boston area. I know some other parts of the country have already reached this point, but we are getting back to it, and we're going to be back at 100% capacity at sporting events, something we can't wait for, which is great for second and third rounds of the NHL playoffs and regular season baseball, and be nice to see Fenway Park full again and all the pink cats in the stands. So there's my dig for the night. Mike took his digs at Tuukka. I take mine at the pink cat Red Sox fans. So for Mike Marcangelo, Bob Kelly, I'm Joe Malkin, your host. Our EP is Craig D'Alessandro. Craig, we hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll talk to you next time.
Hey there, I'm DC. I host the Rock Podcast, Back to the Arena, The Interviews. It's about a 30-minute podcast where I talk one-on-one with a band who has released new music. You can find us on all the best podcast sites like Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, and more. If you're a rock fan like me, subscribe today to Back to the Arena, The Interviews.
Electricast.
Are you a fan of classic cinema or a young person who wants to discover the best films of all time? Do these legendary movies still hold up?
On the Generation Film Podcast, two guys who grew up when movies dominated the culture share a great film with a panel of young movie lovers and see how it plays for today's generation.
We discuss changes in storytelling styles, representation,
The making of each film, its initial reception, and how its meaning has changed over the years.
Join us as we explore cinema classics across generations on Generation Film.
Electricast.